Harley Davidson just went bankrupt. Or did it? This isn't only about motorcycles, it's about America itself shifting beneath your feet. Stay with me, because by the end, you'll see why Harley's fall hits your wallet, your community, and your identity. Don't click away. Watch until the end. The day the eagle stumbled. Harley Davidson did not simply build motorcycles, it built a cultural icon that stretched across more than 100 years of American history. Yet in 2025, a phrase began echoing across social media feeds and financial blogs. Harley just went bankrupt. The claim spread faster than wildfire, even before analysts could verify it. For many people, it did not matter whether the headline was technically accurate. The very fact that it sounded plausible told a darker truth about the brand's fragility. For riders who once saw Harley as untouchable, the shock was not that a rumor existed, but that it felt believable. A company once defined by leather jackets, roaring engines, and patriotic symbolism had become vulnerable to whispers of collapse. The bankruptcy story became less a matter of numbers and more a symbol of doubt. Loyalists who once defended the brand began to ask uneasy questions. Investors, already jittery after years of flat sales, watched the rumor ricochet across markets like a bullet in a steel drum. The day the eagle stumbled was not the day a court filing appeared. It was the day perception shifted. The image of an unbreakable American legend cracked, and in that crack, people saw a company that could fall. And if perception alone could shake Harley, the next question was simple. But the real story of Harley's unraveling began years earlier, when arithmetic collided with identity. Arithmetic versus identity. In the late 2010s, Harley found itself caught in the crossfire of President Donald Trump's tariff war. Tariffs on steel and aluminum sent shockwaves through American manufacturing, and Harley responded not by doubling down on domestic loyalty, but by expanding abroad. In 2018, the company opened a gleaming plant in Thailand, a move designed to sidestep European retaliation and save money. On the balance sheet, it looked like common sense. To customers, it looked like betrayal. Trump seized on the moment with a fury rarely directed at a private company. He accused Harley of abandoning the very patriots who made the brand famous. He warned that moving production abroad would destroy Harley's aura, and he even threatened punishing taxes if the company dared ship those foreign-made bikes back into the United States. For a politician who had campaigned on "Made in America," Harley became a perfect target. Harley's leadership tried to defend their decision as arithmetic, pure business math. But customers were not buying calculators, they were buying identity. For generations, Harley was the soundtrack of American exceptionalism. A Made in Thailand sticker undercut that mythology overnight. Riders who had tattooed the brand's name on their skin felt like the company had sold them out for short-term cost savings. And so a new perception took root. Harley was no longer the defender of tradition, but a corporation chasing margins at the expense of loyalty. But if the outsourcing fight damaged Harley's reputation, its gamble on the future would shake the brand even more. If you've made it this far, you're clearly seeing Harley's story in a whole new light. Drop a like if you're fired up, and leave a comment with your take. Did Harley betray its riders, or was it forced by survival? The silence after the roar. Harley's leadership believed the path forward was electric. In 2019, it launched the Livewire, a sleek battery-powered motorcycle that promised instant torque, futuristic styling, and a direct appeal to younger, eco-conscious riders. On paper, it was the right move. In practice, it struck the wrong chord. The core base of Harley riders did not want silence. They wanted thunder. The legendary roar of a V-twin engine was not just sound, it was identity, rebellion, and belonging. The Livewire hummed more like a household appliance than a warhorse. Harley attempted to engineer synthetic engine noises to mimic the roar, but riders laughed. Rebellion cannot be programmed. Worse, the Livewire carried a price tag far beyond what most 20-something riders could afford. While Harley spoke of innovation and the future, the next generation was buried in student loans and sky-high rents. They were not queuing up to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a bike. The Livewire was a marvel for journalists and tech showcases, but in dealerships it sat like an unsold promise. By trying to leap into the electric era, Harley alienated its old riders and failed to capture new ones. The roar that once defined the brand faded into awkward silence. But silence in the showroom was only part of the crisis. On the balance sheet, another storm was brewing. Communities may lose dealerships, yet riders can still stay road-ready with proven maintenance and safety gear. Link is in the description. Debt, deals, and desperation. While customers wrestled with Harley's cultural missteps, investors watched a financial drama unfold. Harley relied heavily on Harley Davidson Financial Services, the arm that financed loans for new bikes. As sales slowed, the company leaned harder on financial engineering to keep cash flowing. In 2025, Harley struck a deal with KKR and PIMCO, selling off residual interests in its securitized receivables. The move unlocked cash, allowing Harley to pay down debt and even fund stock buybacks. Wall Street applauded. Shares jumped. Headlines called it savvy. But beneath the applause, the strategy revealed desperation. Harley was not generating healthy growth from motorcycles. It was squeezing liquidity from loans already on the books. That is like living by pawning family heirlooms. It works once, maybe twice, but it is not a strategy for survival. The debt story painted a picture of a company playing defense rather than offense. Revenue from bike sales sagged, operating income narrowed, and the brand leaned on financial maneuvers to mask declining fundamentals. For investors who remembered the 1980s rescue tariffs that once saved Harley from Japanese competition, the déjà vu was bitter. Back then, Harley reinvented itself with craftsmanship and patriotism. Now, the fix looked like accounting tricks. And if Harley was running out of financial road, the next crisis would come not from Wall Street, but from the customers it had already lost. The vanishing rider. Harley Davidson's most dangerous enemy was not Yamaha, Honda, or even Indian motorcycles. It was time. The average age of a Harley buyer climbed year after year until the showroom floor resembled a reunion of retirees rather than a gathering of first-time riders. While new energy pulsed through scooter sales and lighter motorcycles in Asia and Europe, Harley's American base aged out of the market. Fewer 20-year-olds were getting motorcycle licenses, and even fewer were willing to spend their limited cash on a heavyweight cruiser that looked like their father's midlife crisis toy. This demographic cliff was not a subtle slope, it was a freefall. Generational loyalty that once seemed indestructible began to unravel. Fathers who had passed their love of Harley to sons discovered that their children preferred a second-hand car to an expensive bike that guzzled gas and required costly insurance. The ritual of handing down a Harley key at graduation became a relic of another era. For Harley's executives, the reality was simple. Their pipeline of future riders had dried up. Without a steady inflow of young customers, Harley's iconic brand was slowly transforming into a museum piece, admired but rarely purchased. Nostalgia can spark pride, but it cannot pay the bills. And when Harley tried to bridge the gap by selling prestige instead of accessibility, the price tag slammed the door on new generations, priced out of relevance. The problem was not simply who Harley tried to sell to, it was how much it asked them to pay. By the early 2020s, the sticker price for many new Harley models soared well into the tens of thousands. Financing options could stretch payments over years, but interest rates and insurance premiums made ownership a luxury, not a rite of passage. For a 25-year-old juggling rent, student loans, and stagnant wages, a Harley was as realistic as a yacht. Instead of pulling in younger riders, Harley priced them out. Entry-level machines existed, but they still carried a premium compared to nimble competitors from Japan or emerging Chinese brands. A rider could buy a functional, stylish alternative for half the cost of a Harley, leaving the American giant looking bloated and out of touch. Harley's attempt to lean into exclusivity only magnified the problem. The very customers who might have renewed the brand's lifeblood were pushed away. As Harley's prices crept upward, its relevance slid downward. A motorcycle company that once symbolized freedom now represented financial strain. The barrier was not just cultural but mathematical. Younger generations simply could not justify the cost, no matter how powerful the engine or how glossy the chrome. Yet when Harley faced the choice between lowering costs or expanding overseas, it chose globalization. And that decision ignited an even more dangerous fire. The Thailand sticker. Few corporate decisions struck a nerve like Harley's choice to build bikes in Thailand. The announcement landed in 2018, justified by executives as a strategic move to avoid tariffs in Europe. But for loyal American riders, it was a scarlet letter stamped across the tank. Harley was not just exporting bikes, it was exporting identity. A Made in Thailand sticker undercut more than 100 years of mythology built on Milwaukee iron. The backlash was visceral. Biker clubs who once treated Harley as gospel began to question the faith. Veterans, union workers, and patriotic consumers accused the company of selling them out. It was not about factory efficiency or trade strategy. It was about betrayal. Customers who had stayed loyal through recessions and gas crises felt abandoned. Political leaders poured fuel on the outrage. President Trump blasted Harley for deserting its workers, warning that the brand's aura would vanish. His words resonated because they echoed what riders were already whispering. Harley had traded patriotism for profit. The cultural wound cut deeper than any financial spreadsheet could measure. And as the thunder of Harley's heritage was replaced with the whisper of outsourcing, the brand tried to pivot toward innovation. But innovation without permission can feel like a hostile takeover of identity. Innovation without permission. Harley's leadership convinced themselves that technology would save them. They introduced electric motorcycles with engineered synthetic roars, dashboards filled with touchscreens, and even flirted with artificial intelligence safety features. On paper, it looked like reinvention. In the showroom, it looked like confusion. Riders who cherished grease, gears, and authenticity saw pre-programmed audio tracks pretending to be rebellion. A company once proud of raw mechanical power was now pitching mood lighting and Bluetooth. The gamble was clear: attract younger, tech-savvy consumers while hoping older riders would follow. But younger riders were not interested in spending $30,000 on a lifestyle experiment. Older riders, meanwhile, recoiled at the thought of their Harley humming like an electric toothbrush. The strategy left Harley straddling an impossible line, alienating the faithful while failing to impress the future. Innovation is not inherently the enemy, but timing and context matter. Harley tried to dictate a new culture rather than invite its community to shape one. The result was backlash from both sides. In trying to be everything, Harley became something unfamiliar to everyone. And while cultural confusion spread, Harley's real survival depended less on new gadgets and more on whether its financial lifeline could hold. The receivables lifeline. When Harley could not sell enough bikes to fuel growth, it leaned on something less visible but equally powerful: loans. Harley Davidson Financial Services became the company's secret engine, writing credit for riders and then packaging those loans into securities. In 2025, Harley struck a headline deal with KKR and PIMCO, selling residual interests in its receivables. This maneuver released hundreds of millions in cash, money Harley used to reduce debt and even repurchase shares. Wall Street cheered. The stock price surged. Analysts praised Harley for clever financial engineering. But beneath the applause lurked a sobering truth. Harley was no longer surviving on roaring motorcycles, but on the quiet hum of structured finance. Securitization can free cash once or twice, but it cannot replace demand. It is like living on payday advances rather than earning a steady paycheck. The more Harley leaned on receivables, the more obvious it became that the motorcycle business was stagnant. The lifeline bought time, but it did not buy growth. Harley could engineer liquidity, but it could not engineer passion in a showroom where fewer people were walking through the doors. And as investors looked past the short-term cash infusion, they began to notice the next troubling pattern. Quarterly numbers that told a story Wall Street wanted to hear, but customers knew was false. Quarterly smokescreens. Every 3 months, Harley's executives stepped in front of cameras and announced guidance. They spoke of headwinds, of careful cost control, of brand repositioning. The numbers they shared often looked stable on the surface, but inside the company, shipments were falling and operating income was shrinking. In some quarters, Harley even pulled back on guidance entirely, citing uncertainty, which sounded less like caution and more like an admission of weakness. The strategy was obvious: soften expectations, deliver a slightly better number, and hope the stock stabilizes. Investors, hungry for reassurance, often played along. Yet on the ground, dealers saw showrooms empty, younger riders uninterested, and the iconic machines collecting dust. The gap between the narrative on Wall Street and the reality on Main Street widened quarter after quarter. This widening gap hurt more than financial credibility. It eroded trust among riders who followed the company closely. They felt Harley was hiding behind investor jargon rather than confronting its cultural crisis head-on. A company built on raw authenticity was now delivering corporate doublespeak. But the most dangerous gap was not between words and numbers. It was between Harley and the customers it desperately needed to win back. Customers who were turning instead to foreign brands that offered something Harley could not. Chasing ghosts. Harley knew it needed fresh blood in its customer base. The problem was how to get it. The company tried launching smaller, cheaper bikes, but these offerings were late, limited, and often more expensive than the competition. Riders in India, China, and across Southeast Asia were buying motorcycles in record numbers, but they were not Harleys. They were choosing nimble, affordable machines from Honda, Bajaj, or emerging Chinese companies that blended price with practicality. Harley's attempt to capture this segment often felt like chasing ghosts. By the time a Harley entry-level model reached the market, rivals had already captured loyalty at half the cost. In markets like India, Harley introduced motorcycles designed for affordability, but even then they were outclassed by local brands that understood what young riders wanted: simple, reliable, cheap transport. Harley could not lower prices without eroding margins, and it could not command prestige in markets where brand aura carried little weight. The result was predictable. Harley remained a luxury item, admired by some, ignored by most. In chasing new riders abroad, it failed to secure them at home. The ghosts it chased slipped away, leaving the company straddling a shrinking premium niche. And while Harley stumbled abroad, the politics of home came roaring back, dragging the company once more into a battlefield it could not escape: the return of the culture war. If Harley's financial maneuvers and foreign missteps strained its business, politics nearly broke it. The echoes of Donald Trump's trade wars never faded. Tariffs on steel and aluminum raised costs. European retaliation forced Harley to seek offshore production, and the optics of Thailand factories became symbols of betrayal. Every move Harley made to protect margins seemed to confirm suspicions that it had abandoned its patriotic soul. Harley became a political football. Trump blasted the company publicly, warning that its aura would vanish if it abandoned American workers. Union leaders rallied against outsourcing, painting Harley as another corporation trading tradition for profit. On social media, the brand was pulled into wider debates about globalization, woke corporations, and American decline. What should have been a manufacturing decision became a culture war grenade. The constant swirl of politics destabilized Harley's image. Even riders who loved the machines grew weary of the drama. Instead of representing freedom, Harley came to symbolize division. The roar of the engine was drowned out by the roar of partisanship. And just as politics consumed Harley's reputation, the company's vulnerabilities were about to ripple far beyond Milwaukee into dealerships, supply chains, and communities built on the promise of American steel. Dealers without a flag. When a company like Harley collapses, the shock does not begin in corporate boardrooms. It begins in dealerships scattered across small towns and suburbs. For more than 100 years, Harley dealerships were not only places to buy motorcycles, but cultural hubs. Families gathered for weekend rides, veterans swapped stories, and local parades often featured rows of chrome machines flying American flags. When those dealerships shutter, they leave more than empty showrooms. They leave craters in the communities that define them. Dealership owners who had spent decades cultivating loyal customers faced not just financial ruin, but the humiliation of locking their doors forever. Employees, many of whom had built lifelong careers around the brand, suddenly found themselves unemployed. Riders who once had a local hub now saw their community dissolve. A Harley dealership was never just a store. It was a clubhouse, a ritual, a small corner of Main Street that told people they belonged to something bigger. In many towns, Harley dealerships doubled as landmarks, sponsoring Little League teams, hosting charity rides, and anchoring local festivals. When they disappeared, the loss went far beyond commerce. Communities lost gathering spaces, traditions unraveled, and a piece of small-town Americana quietly slipped into history, leaving silence where engines once roared. With the lights off and the flags taken down, main streets across America felt hollow. The collapse of dealerships did not just erase sales, it erased identity. And once the showrooms dimmed, the silence spread backward into the very arteries of Harley's industrial machine, its suppliers. Supply chains in freefall. Every Harley that rolled onto a dealership floor represented thousands of parts sourced from suppliers across the Midwest. From steel frames forged in Wisconsin to leather seats stitched in Ohio, a single bike carried the work of countless small manufacturers. When Harley's demand dried up, those businesses found themselves staring into the abyss. For a small shop producing fenders or wiring harnesses, losing Harley contracts was not a setback. It was a death sentence. The ripple spread quickly. Tool and die shops closed. Parts warehouses sat idle. Trucking companies that hauled components saw routes vanish. The ecosystem that supported Harley was never just one corporation. It was thousands of families, paychecks, and second-generation businesses that relied on steady orders. The collapse of Harley created a chain reaction that crushed them one by one. For many small-town suppliers, Harley was not just a client, but the backbone of their survival. Losing those contracts meant auctioning equipment, laying off longtime workers, and shuttering family-run shops. Generations who once prided themselves on feeding Harley's assembly lines now faced the heartbreak of watching livelihoods vanish overnight. Even finance lenders tied to Harley's loan network felt the quake. With fewer bikes being sold, loan portfolios shrank, and asset-backed securities once considered reliable began to wobble. The dominoes of industrial decline toppled faster than analysts could count. But if supply chains crumbled under Harley's weight, the political world saw an opportunity to turn that collapse into ammunition for an entirely different battle. Politics, populism, and the last ride. The fall of Harley was more than an economic event. It was a political gift. Campaign strategists immediately seized on the symbolism. Here was America's most iconic motorcycle company, a brand older than sliced bread, collapsing under the weight of globalization, outsourcing, and cultural missteps. For populists, it became proof that corporate elites had betrayed working families. For nationalists, it became a rallying cry to bring manufacturing home. Union leaders took to podiums, pointing at shuttered plants and abandoned dealerships as monuments to corporate greed. Politicians thundered about betrayal, vowing that no more American icons would be surrendered to foreign soil. Biker rallies that once celebrated freedom became protest grounds, their leather jackets now banners of outrage. Harley's death rattled into the bloodstream of electoral politics, shaping debates about tariffs, trade, and the soul of American industry. The symbolism was irresistible. News anchors replayed images of Harley convoys alongside headlines about layoffs, framing the collapse as proof that the American dream was faltering. Town hall debates turned into shouting matches over whether Washington should have protected Harley. the brand's failure became an emotional trigger across red and blue states. The culture war Harley once tried to sidestep now consumed it completely. It was no longer a motorcycle company. It was a metaphor for the decline of American exceptionalism. And metaphors make powerful weapons in campaign season. Yet as politicians sparred, investors and competitors quietly began carving up the remains, asking who would win in the open road left behind. We've uncovered betrayal, collapse, and political fallout. But the real ride isn't over. If you've stuck with me until now, hit subscribe and join the community. That way, you'll never miss the twists that shape your wallet, your freedom, and your future. Stay ready. The road ahead matters. Winners, losers, and the open road. The vacuum Harley left behind did not stay empty for long. Competitors from Japan, Europe, and China surged forward, eager to capture disillusioned riders. Honda and Yamaha offered affordable machines that appealed to young commuters. BMW and Ducati marketed luxury and performance to those who once saw Harley as aspirational. Chinese manufacturers pushed aggressively into export markets, using cost advantages to flood showrooms with alternatives. Investors, too, saw opportunity. Credit funds bought distressed Harley assets, while private equity circled Harley Davidson Financial Services, eyeing its loan portfolios like vultures. Independent shops adapted by servicing used Harleys, turning scarcity into profit. Consumers who once saved for years to buy a new Harley now found themselves weighing cheaper, more reliable bikes from abroad. The collapse also reshaped the used motorcycle market. Collectors rushed to secure vintage Harleys, driving prices skyward, while everyday riders clung to their aging machines with pride. Suddenly, an old Sportster or Softail carried not just sentimental value, but a badge of authenticity that no foreign brand could replicate. For riders, the loss was not only about choice, but identity. The open road suddenly looked crowded with strangers. To rebuild, Harley would have needed an impossible blend of affordable entry models, authentic domestic production, and innovation that respected tradition. Instead, its absence redrew the map of global motorcycling. The open road belongs to those who ride it, and Harley, once its most dominant symbol, became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even legends can vanish when they lose sight of the people who made them great. Harley's collapse isn't just about motorcycles. It's about loyalty, identity, and the future of American industry. You've seen how the cracks turned into chaos, how politics, debt, and betrayal collided. Now it's your turn to ride with us. Subscribe right now so you never miss the next twist shaping your freedom, your wallet, and your world. Hit that bell, drop your thoughts in the comments, and share this with someone who still believes legends can't fall. Because if Harley can stumble, anything can, and you don't want to be caught off guard when it does.